Here we go, Blues, here we go. Manchester City are suing the Premier League. Now, I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. Let's play that clip straight away. Let's get into it. This is what I said going all the way back to the 16th of January of this year. Eventually, this will end up in the court of law. And this is where Manchester City could do Newcastle a favour and ripping down the barricades of spending and allowing Newcastle to spend. But the fact is that fans still continuously talk about how anti-competitive it would be, and they need to stop it. And there are laws, anti-competitive laws in the UK. They are. And they are as follows, because the Competition Act of 1998 states, this Competition Act of 1988 prohibits anti-competitive agreements between businesses. In particular, you must not agree to fix prices or terms of trade, for example, agreeing price rises with your competitors. You must not agree to limit production to reduce competition. You must not carve up markets or customers, for example, agreeing with a competitor that you will bid for one contract and they will take another. You must not discriminate between customers, for example, charging different prices or imposing different terms where there is no difference in the circumstances of supply. Those are the Competition Act law of 1998. That's official laws of the UK. Did you hear a word about spending more than you earn? Was there a single statement in what I just said where it says you must not spend more than you earn? No, because if you do, you can end up in trouble. Yes, I understand that. I understand what they're saying is like, oh, we're trying to prevent you from spending yourself into non-existence. That's what they're claiming they're trying to do. No, they're just trying to keep the top at the top and the bottom at the bottom. They keep the pyramid as it is. The constant shift and change of the pyramid, with investment coming into new, fresh ideas from fresh businessmen coming in and investing in smaller clubs and shifting the pyramid around, it doesn't suit the voting members of the Premier League who are in the Premier League, because there's a good chance they may no longer be in the Premier League because other clubs could come up and take their place. And who doesn't like that? The people that are already in their top spots, the ones that have got sitting on their thrones in the top 10, top 15 of the Premier League, they don't like it. They don't want to be disturbed up there because it's hunky-dory sitting in there in their ivory towers. Manchester City's now got a firm member and a very good seat at the round table with the Premier League, sitting there and enjoying our place at the top. They don't want to be disturbed, and through good spending and good management of a football club, there's every chance they could stay there. You start pissing about with your money, yeah, you could start ending going down. That's to the detriment, but the way to prevent that is to get a decent ownership model ruling. Not just spending, the actual model, the actual ownership. Like the proven track record as a businessman. Some bloke who wins the lottery and has got 300 million to spend goes and buys a championship club but has got zero experience of running a business whatsoever, let alone a football club. You give him the reins and he'll be a wild man riding a tiger, not knowing what to do with it. You know, once he hops off that tiger, the tiger's going to bite him. That's the simple nature of it. And yeah, preventing that from happening is essential. And we've got to do that. But talking about the money side of it only, that's nonsense, absolute nonsense. There you go, I told you so. It would end up in court, it would end up getting very serious. You poke the bear and you find out that the bear's got claws, and that's exactly what's happened. Now, why are Manchester City suing the Premier League? There is a lot of confusion and excessive connection, if that makes sense, to the 115. I think there's a huge gap between the two. I think this has been blown out of proportion. In fact, I actually think there's been an over-exaggeration as to what Manchester City are annoyed about. The fact that this is being blown into the 115 charges was inevitable. A PR campaign that I think City give very little shits about, to be honest. I think they're beyond trying to rectify the label cheats and all the 115 merchants in the comments of videos, and wherever you see City getting success now, it's followed by haters saying 115. We're going to have to live with that. I'm cool with that. I'm no problem. What I want to happen is Manchester City to continue winning Premier League after Premier League after Premier League. We're doing very well at that. Very, very well indeed. And we're going to continue to do that because we're going to wipe the fucking floor with the Premier League, like I told you, exactly like I told you, and it's going to happen. Now, why are Manchester City suing the Premier League? It's focused in on one rule in particular. The APT rule. Now, what is this rule? The Associated Party Transactions. All these acronyms, man. APT, FFP, PSR. It's crazy. And it's a shame that the sport has now become more about law and financial gains and losses and very little about the actual sport itself. Now, who's to blame for that? Who's to blame for that? Is City to blame for that? We didn't make the rules. Do you know what I mean? We didn't make these rules. You started these rules. Do you know? And why can't rules be questioned? Why is no one questioning, bothering asking the rules? Because you're putting your faith, if you are a rival of Manchester City, you're putting your faith in the Premier League. Okay, a very stupid thing to do, in fact, to be honest. But you're putting your faith in the Premier League. These are the people who can't make the rules of the game clear, let alone financial rules and rules that are involving the law, the UK law that needs to be abided by. The Competition Act of 1998 gets very much breached when you talk about these APT rules and what is fair market value, a very subjective subject, to be honest. A topic that's easily manipulated. Very easily manipulated and very open-ended to circumvention. Now, I don't understand why people find it so hard to accept that Manchester City are willing to address these rules and question the rules, because, like I said, these guys, they can't even understand the handball rule. What hope have they got of getting the financial rules right? They rushed these rules out. Now, what is the APT? Basically, it says that you can't, in a very layman's term, you can't hire or use a sponsorship from an already owned business model. So if you own Manchester City and you also have ties to the Etihad, you can't then inflate their value and say Manchester City are being sponsored by the Etihad for £1 billion. Now, that's what the stats that people are putting out there. Idiots are saying that City are overinflating the value to such a degree. It's not true. And first of all, Manchester City are about to make the Etihad a public company, which is handing over the smoking gun that we apparently have. If we're about to make all our accounts available to the public for you and I to read regarding all the Etihad's transactions, why would a guilty party do that? Open the door to all the evidence that we're being accused of. Have a look at our systems. Have a look at our data. Have a look at all of the transactions that have taken place between Manchester City and the Etihad. We're about to make them a public company. Why would we do that? And no one's asking these very, very simple questions, but for me, what the Premier League are being sued for is because of the APT rules and how they are in breach of the Competition Act, first of all, and how they're not dealt with independently. The Premier League have hired a company called the Nielsen Sports to analyse the sponsorship of each sponsor. Every deal that comes through, any deal that's over £1 million in sponsorship value, has to be submitted to the Premier League. They then review it. They review it, basically, but they give it to Nielsen Sports, who are hired by the Premier League, a third party that's been hired by the Premier League to review these sponsorship deals. Now, tell me where the word independent comes into any of that. Is anything independent about that? The Premier League have hired the company to do it. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's a farce. It's an absolute farce. It's clear. Now, what City are objecting to is this particular rule. They're not attacking FFP. They're not attacking PSR. They're not attacking all the allegations yet. They are about to do that. But everything that's gone on with the 115 is to do with those particular charges, the financial breaches that have nothing to do with this rule yet, because the rule was introduced in 2021. Now, what City are being charged for, I'll tell you exactly what Manchester City are being charged for. Here they are. 54 of the charges relating to providing accurate financial information from 2009 to 2018. 14 of the charges relating to player and manager payments from 2009 to 2018. 5 relating to UEFA's FFP rules 2013 to 2018. 7 of the charges relating to the Premier League's PSR rules from 2015 to 2018. And finally, the only charges that go beyond 2018 are 35 charges of failing to cooperate with the Premier League's investigation. That's it. That's it, really. That's nothing to do with finances whatsoever. That's just failing to cooperate. This is what we got fined for in the CAS case. What UEFA fined us for. The exact same thing. So there was no evidence to say City did what they claimed us to do. All the evidence suggested was City didn't play ball with UEFA. City didn't want to submit because they believed they were innocent. And they said, if you want to prove us guilty, take us to court. So UEFA went, okay, we will do, thinking they were good, giving it Billy Big Bollocks, and they lost. They lost. They got a fine out of us for failing to cooperate. The Premier League are probably about to do the same. Now, the rules for the APT rules, associated party transactions, came into play in 2021. Now, the majority of the financial breaches that we are alleged to have broken, okay, these rules all started from 2009 and finished at 2018. So there's your time frame. The fact that there's very little crossover between the two. People are claiming that this is going to have a huge impact on the 115 charges. It may make the tiniest of dent into those particular charges. It will strengthen our case in the sense that these charges will be easily related to. They'll be easy to point at. Manchester City will be able to point to those rules and say, well, those rules that you're now are charging us for, first of all, they weren't in place to begin with. So it brings into question the credibility of the Premier League to begin with, and how well they are established to even be making these rules to begin with, and why Manchester City voted for the white paper. But I can't stress enough, we're not suing them for the 115 charges. We're not suing them for financial breaches that we're being alleged to have broken. We're suing them for a very particular rule that has been microscoped into, we're zoned into that particular rule Manchester City have, and said that is unacceptable, because that is very, very specifically targeting clubs with a certain contacts, like Manchester City, Newcastle. Newcastle should be absolutely loving this. We are natural allies in this situation. But will they see it that way? I'm not sure. Everton, Nottingham Forest, Leicester, all facing similar charges. Now they're going to be in the same boat as Manchester City, because if they can spend a certain amount of money by generating revenue through sponsorship deals, through contacts, is what they're basically saying. You can't use your contacts. That's basically, have you ever heard anything like that in the world of business? Where if you have contacts, if you have access to certain businesses or certain individuals that can help you promote your business to some sort of success, have you ever heard of anything being restricted like that, where you say, no, you can't use that business, but you can use that business to sponsor you? If a sponsorship wants to sponsor you, who are you to say you can't sponsor it? It's a nonsensical argument. The rules were rushed. So the fact that these rules came into play, like I said, in 2021 is a real indication of how poorly ran the Premier League is point one. The fact that they came in 4 days after Newcastle's takeover. Manchester City are fighting Newcastle's case here. We recognise the danger of what the Premier League are doing here and trying to prevent Manchester City from growing and doing what we want to do from a commercial side of the game. It's not astronomical figures. We are doing incredibly well financially, with revenue that is now top of the pile in the Premier League. But aren't we top of the pile of the Premier League when it comes to football as well? So doesn't that make sense? Isn't that how it works? Doesn't success breed more success? You know, these sponsorships want to be associated with successful football clubs. If you win on the pitch, you win off the pitch. If you're winning off the pitch without winning on the pitch, I think you've got an argument. I think you make a point there. But the facts are Manchester City have been winning on the pitch for quite some time, and now the revenue has started to grow. The revenue back then, that's what the questions are, and that's what the 115 is to do with. That's what the 115 is to do with, is how Manchester City were able to generate revenue with rules that were being made up on a whim. Just randomly, just scattergun approach from the Premier League, just to make it up as they go along, to try and present as many obstacles to Manchester City as feasibly possible. You know, it's clear as day there is an absolute agenda. Now, for me, you've got to question a lot of factors. Is historically, why were these rules not introduced when Jack Walker would take over Blackburn for them to go and succeed and win the Premier League, signing the likes of Alan Shearer? Why did no one question Louis Edwards' takeover? Even though that's going back to the bloody 50s, United claimed that they were able to generate their own revenue through football success. No, they were invested. Every single football club you've ever seen has received investment at some level. Now, what they're saying is there is a certain cap as to what that level can be. That's what the Premier League want, is because the big red clubs, United, Arsenal, Liverpool, the American guys, the Glazers, the Cronkies, the FSGs, they don't want the idea of Manchester City coming in, or Newcastle coming in, or even Abramovich when he came into Chelsea. Someone who's got more money than them, taking over, replacing them. That's all this is. That's all this is. It's very, very simple. Now, the words tyranny of the majority is quite aggressive from Manchester City. Now, as much as part of me, that's the one area of this that I stopped and thought, you can't really question democracy, because it's a proven success in most countries. Now, first point is we're not talking about countries. We're talking about a Premier League. We're talking about very specific agendas of 20 football clubs. So it's very easily manipulated, and calling it democracy. Now, while democracy is democracy to whatever level of votes that are going to be received, whether it's the millions of people that can vote for a prime minister or a president of that country, or 20 in a Premier League, it gets a bit, it's a bit easily manipulated when 20 people are talking about it. That's point one. Now, the tyranny of the majority is an easy subject to talk about. Now, flip the script. Let's say a Super League was put in. Hypothetically, let's talk about a Super League, because this is potentially where this is going. If this doesn't get sorted, if Manchester City lose, then we will start to probably see a Super League. I don't want that. I think that would be bad for football, for English football. Now, let's do a vote. I would love to see a public vote of the whole of the world. Every single football fan in the world gets to vote. Would you like to see a Super League where the Premier League is no longer the Premier League and football clubs will be played like a franchise across the globe? Next week, one week you're playing in Japan, next week you're playing in New York, the week after that you're in Mumbai. Wherever part of the world, the football clubs will be taken around the world and showcased to the world. Now, you ask the football fans to vote for that, okay? You want to see what the votes will be? Do you think Asia would vote against that? They get to see these clubs. It's a lifetime opportunity to imagine going to the Etihad to watch Manchester City play, or Old Trafford for United if you're a United fan, or whoever you support. The idea of being able to see your favourite player in the flesh is extremely appealing to most fans out there. Now, if it went to a vote, would you call it the tyranny of the majority then? I think a lot of the UK fans would. And all of a sudden, you're the minority. Because even though the UK, we would all vote keep the Premier League in England, I would be one of those voting for that. Ask the Americans, would they like to see Manchester City played in New York or somewhere near them where they could have access to tickets and go and see these players? India, China, Japan, all of these places in the world that Manchester City would you think they'd vote against that? No, keep it where you are. We don't need to see you in the flesh. Keep it over there in the UK. But if they got a vote to say, where do you think the votes would land? You'd be in the minority. And then you'd be bitching and moaning, wouldn't you? Exactly. So this is the point that City are making, is sometimes you don't get your own way. And that's the tough part for me to understand, is why I think City have to accept that the Premier League voting is what they want to vote in this scenario. This is that particular scenario. But City have voted for the white paper. And that's the question, is if the votes are coming from the 20 clubs, these 20 clubs have proven quite clearly they cannot police themselves. They all have very specific agendas that suit their ideologies and their agendas. It's all to do with their individual approach. Every single one. Now, if 16 or 14 or 12 or however many of the clubs all have similarly aligned goals and targets that they know full well that they can't compete with the likes of Newcastle or Chelsea or Manchester City, if they can't compete with them, then they're going to vote together, aren't they? They're going to stick together, they're going to team up, because that suits their agenda. Now, why are Manchester City one of the only clubs, by the way, to vote for the white paper, which was to introduce an independent regulator where you just take all the way of votes away from them, give it to the independent regulator, an impartial, independent regulator who will make all the decisions for you. I mean, some people will say that's a bad thing. Some people, I personally think that it could be better than this, because they clearly can't police themselves right now. All the clubs that are voting for systems that they don't understand them, first of all, because the systems that are being proposed to them are so bent and so broken and easily manipulated with loopholes galore. Do you know what I mean? So they're guessing. The Premier League clubs are like, well, what's the foreseeable future for this rule? I don't know, but I can already see a loophole in it, so I'm going to vote yes and get my way around it some other way. And then the Premier League go, oh shit, we didn't close that loophole. We'll make a new rule. Even these APT rules that were introduced of October in 2021, they were revised February of this year. This year. I made my video about the Competition Act in January. So I was seeing this coming before the fucking Premier League was. If I can see it coming, how can they not see it coming? Of course they can. I'm not an expert here. But, I mean, those guys are. These people running these football clubs are way more qualified than I ever will be to be able to talk on such subjects. But the idea that they can't see it, but I can, give over, man. Seriously. Of course it was going to be manipulated. What did you expect? It was such a bad rule to begin with, and so open. It's like a piece of art. How much is a piece of art worth? Can you tell me how much is a piece of art worth? No, because it's up to the buyer. The buyer will decide how much they see it as worth of value. And you can't say that these sponsorship companies that want to sponsor Manchester City have made a bad investment, because their brand is now being associated with a football club that is winning year on year. A treble last year. We won 3 cups this year. FIFA Club World Cup, UEFA Super Cup, Premier League, 4 in a row. 6 out of the last 7 won by Manchester City. Why wouldn't you want to be associated with that level of success? Now, if you invested a little bit more, and that's the point I also want to make, is there is just a little bit more than what some people, it's an opinion-based thing. This is how can you tell what's the market value is to somebody else when somebody says, no, I think it is worth that. It's opinions. How can you take that to court? When you're dealing with numbers, you need to deal with facts. And this is too subjective. It's too subjective for me. And it's clearly all about the independent panel for me. That's where this will end up eventually, that Manchester City have to get for our own sake, and I think for the Premier League's sake, they need to stop trying to make up the rules themselves, because they clearly can't. They don't know what they're doing in the Premier League. And it's alarming that this has gone this far. I said it would. I said City would hit the nuclear launch button. They've done it. They've done it with a very specific rule, mind you. What the knock-on effects are going to be for the rest of for the charges as well, with the fact that this hearing is going to be as early as next week and could last up to 2 weeks. So we're going to get a very quick resolution, hopefully, a quick resolution to this particular saga. The 115 charges will follow in suit, following in the of November. Reportedly, that's when the charges will. The 115 charges will take place in November and last up to 6 weeks, with a verdict expected to be announced in spring of 2025. So we've got a long wait for that. How that's going to be intertwined into this particular case, I feel like there will be minimal crossover. I feel like there will be some crossover. Gives the lawyers the opportunities to point the finger a little bit and say, well, look at them making those rules. They clearly don't know what they're doing. So why wouldn't they be able to question the next set of rules? It opens the door for Manchester City to question the whole overarching problem to begin with, which is FFP, and why the whole thing was broken to begin with. The whole thing was a farce, and all the rival fans, they got in bed. And some people are claiming that it's tactics, delay tactics, like tangling up the Premier League's resources, the legal resources that they have, increasing the legal resources by 300%, which to me is hilarious. Ha ha. And you reap what you sow, Premier League. You started this fight, and we're going to fucking end it. That's how it works. Unfortunately for you, you chose a battle you couldn't win. So, yeah, you reap what you sow, Premier League. But the fact that the people are calling them tactics, and what is frustrating from a City fan point of view is the fact that these tactics that Manchester City are using are so bad. How dare Manchester City use tactics to delay the Premier League or to tangle them up? Perfectly legal. Exactly what happens in every court case of this magnitude is the opposition law team versus the other law team. They will use tactics to one another. Wasn't 115 a tactic to begin with? Do you not realise that this whole thing started with a tactic? 115 charges, that is just throwing all the shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. Is that not a tactic? No, that was celebrated. That was a great idea, because that gave rival fans the ammunition to say 115 cheats this and cheats that. But that's a tactic, and it's a potentially good one. It's not the first time it's ever been done, but throwing enough at them to hope that they eventually get something is been done before. So now Manchester City are using tactics against the Premier League, and now it's like, oh no, how dare you use those tactics? We're using the same tactics, that the playbook of Raw that has been happening for years, for decades, centuries, to be honest. Probably a lot of it will be. And I mean, I don't know why you're surprised. I really am not surprised at all. But like I said, the Premier League charges will be heard between November and onwards, lasting 6 weeks. This is going to be heard starting the 10th of June and could last for 2 weeks. 19 other clubs have been invited, which is another point in saying 10 to 12, according to the original source, which is Matt Lawton of The Times. I've suggested that 10 to 12 clubs have stepped forward. All of the media, which is an indication of where their agendas lie, because they gave them a spectrum of 10 to 12. All of the media are now saying 12. They're not saying 10, because that doesn't sound good, does it? That sounds like half of the Premier League are on City's side and half of the Premier League are against them. Doesn't sound good, that, does it? Doesn't sound that maybe the other 10 have started to recognise that maybe City know what they're doing and they've got the foresight to at least see these problems, looking on into the horizon to see what's about to happen. And that's exactly what they're doing. But no, they're saying it's 12 because that's a little bit more. That's the majority, effectively. 10 to 12, but now it's 12. Let's go with 10. I'm going to go with 10. Yeah, let's call it half of the Premier League are against City, and the other half, City included, are for City. One witness statement, which is clearly going to be Newcastle, who are on the side of Manchester City. They're going to be teaming up. And I mean, it's the American owners. You know full well it's the Glazers, the Cronkies, and the FSG group. It's them. They're the ones who are manipulating the Premier League side of things. They're the ones who will have voted for the APT rules because they were able to generate the revenue that Manchester City and potentially Newcastle could do. I mean, no one was complaining when United were doing it. No one was complaining when Liverpool were doing it in the 80s, and Arsenal have had little periods of doing it themselves, of dominating football. It swings and roundabouts. The game's about investment. Every single football club has received investment, and that's the facts. Just because now the level of investment is not to your liking and you can't compete, tough shit. It's the way of the world.
This is difficult.